My parents kicked me out because I didn't follow their rules, convinced I'd never make it without them. Weeks later, they called, panicking about the utility bills I'd been covering. I told them, figure it out without me, just like you said I should. Hey Reddit, I'm Lyra24F. And I guess I always knew things weren't quite right at home, but I never imagined it would end like this. I didn't expect the sudden eviction, the manipulation, the fake concern, or the phone call that finally pushed me over the edge. So, let's rewind a bit. I grew up in a really small, close-knit town where everyone knew everyone else's business, or at least pretended to. Image was everything, especially to my parents, Mira and Henry. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Church every Sunday, matching Christmas sweaters, a pristine front lawn, dinner at 6 p.m. sharp. If someone in our town made a list of the top 5 most respectable families, ours would definitely be on it, no question. But if you scratched beneath that perfect surface, things felt different. Not openly explosive or dramatic, just cold, controlled, and calculated. I was never physically abused or screamed at, not in the way people usually picture toxic parents. No, my parents were much more subtle. Their methods were rooted in guilt, emotional manipulation, and a never-ending list of expectations that always seemed just out of reach. My mum, Myra, is the kind of woman who speaks with a calm, almost gentle voice, but every word she says has a hidden barb. She'd smile while putting you down, talking about love as if it were a prize you had to earn by always agreeing with her. And my dad, Henry, he didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. Not because he was kind or wise, but because his cold authority made you feel like you were 12 again, no matter how old you were. As the oldest daughter, I got the full brunt of their expectations. I was supposed to be the role model, the helper, the good one, and for a long time, I really tried. I went to the local university instead of leaving town, even though I'd been accepted into a better out-of-state school. I lived at home, helped with bills, ran errands, and stayed out of trouble, and still, it was never enough. They'd comment about how I was too sensitive when I asked for a little personal space. I was disrespectful if I missed a family event. I was prideful if I dared to disagree with their opinions. There was no room for different perspectives, no space for a voice that wasn't theirs. Everything had to be done their way, or it was wrong. I didn't realize how suffocating it all was until about a year ago when I started working remotely for a small tech firm. It wasn't my dream job or anything glamorous, but it paid better than any job I'd had before and gave me a sense of independence. That job was the beginning of everything unraveling, or maybe, finally coming into focus. I started saving money quietly, slowly, carefully. I didn't tell them. I knew exactly what would happen if I did. They'd either discourage me or suddenly demand I contribute even more. I was already covering most of the household utility bills, water, electricity, internet, all in my name. My mum called it a lesson in adulting, but really, it was just a way to make me more financially tied down and dependent. And like an idiot, I went along with it. But when my savings started to look substantial, I began looking at apartments. Nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom across town, enough to have peace, privacy, and room to breathe. I didn't plan on a grand exit. My idea was to quietly transition out, give them notice, maybe even maintain some kind of relationship. That was incredibly naive of me. It started with small arguments. One Sunday, I said I didn't feel like going to church. My mom raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, since when is worship optional for you?" I explained I needed rest, that I was working longer hours now. She replied, "Well, if you're so tired, maybe you should stop spending your energy on things that pull you away from your family." That was her warning. A few days later, she asked to see my budget, just out of curiosity. When I said I preferred to keep it private, she laughed and said, "We're just trying to help you not fall into bad habits." She made my independence sound dangerous. Then came the night. Everything snapped. It was a Thursday. I came home late after a meeting and found both of them waiting in the kitchen. My dad was leaning on the counter, arms crossed. Myra was sitting at the table, hands folded, as if preparing to deliver gentle bad news. Henry spoke first. "Your mother and I feel that you've lost your way." I blinked. "Lost my way? You're secretive, distant. You've stopped attending services. You don't speak to us unless we speak to you first. That's not how we raised you." "I've just been busy," I said. "With work, with it's more than that," Mira interrupted, her voice soft but sharp. "There's a spirit of rebellion in you, Lyra, and we can't have that under our roof." There it was, the ultimatum. I could either fall back in line or leave. I remember staring at them, wondering if they really expected me to beg. They did, of course. So I stood up, walked to my room, and began packing. No shouting, no slamming doors, just quiet movement, and the sound of something finally breaking inside me. I moved out that very night. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't scream or cry. I just quietly filled 2 suitcases with essentials. Clothes, my laptop, a box of keepsakes. I didn't trust them to leave anything untouched. Everything else, books, decor, the old desk I loved stayed behind. My car, thankfully, was fully paid off. I'd bought it with my own money 2 years earlier, despite Henry's repeated comments like, "It's foolish to buy a car without consulting your family first." That night, I drove straight to my friend Rena's place. She'd casually offered her guest room before, but when I texted her from my car, needing a place to land, she replied in all caps, "Yes, come, do you want me to put on the kettle?" I stayed there for 2 weeks while finalizing my lease. That apartment I'd been eyeing was still available. It felt like a sign. I signed the papers the same day I got paid. Those 2 weeks were strange. I had space to think, breathe, and move. At my own pace. Rena never asked invasive questions. She didn't judge me if I slept until 9 a.m. or skipped a phone call. The silence in her apartment was comfortable, not suffocating like home. I started realizing how much of my life had been shaped by obligation, not love, just the need to survive in someone else's narrative. Meanwhile, Mira texted every couple of days, not to ask how I was, of course. She didn't do things that directly. Her messages were short and cutting. "Would have been nice to know you were going to abandon your family. I hope this rebellion brings you peace. It certainly won't. Bring you blessings. Don't forget whose name is on your upbringing." I didn't respond, not once, but the texts kept coming. Henry didn't message. That wasn't his style. He preferred silence, the kind that felt like a noose tightening around you. His disapproval was always louder than any words. After moving into my apartment, I kept a low profile. I didn't post about it online. I didn't tell any extended relatives. I needed time to settle into a rhythm that was truly mine. I bought secondhand furniture, rearranged things half a dozen times, and cooked simple meals that tasted like freedom. Then the phone call came. It had been about 6 weeks since I left. I was working late, deep into a client project, when my phone rang. It was Mira. At first I thought she'd pocket-dialed me. She never called, and something about seeing her name on my screen made my stomach tighten. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lyra," she said immediately. No greeting, no warmth, just my name, sharp as a slap. "Yes." There was a pause, then a long, deep sigh. "I suppose you're too proud to reach out first." "I wasn't planning to," I replied calmly. More silence. "Well then, I'll get to the point." She sounded like she was chewing her words. "We just received a notice from the electric company. Apparently, the last 2 payments weren't processed. The account's overdue." I leaned back in my chair. A part of me had been waiting for this. "Okay," I said. "You were handling that bill," she added quickly, as if trying to trap me in some kind of responsibility net. "It was in your name." "That's right, it was in my name," I replied. "And since I don't live there anymore, I closed the account last week." The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel her scrambling on the other end. "You were..." "I closed the account. I figured you'd want your own name on the utilities since I'm no longer part of the household. You should have informed us," she said, her voice rising slightly, still trying to maintain control. "That was extremely irresponsible." I laughed. "Not out of cruelty, just disbelief. You told me I wasn't part of the family anymore, that you couldn't have me under your roof. Why would I continue paying your bills? You're still our daughter," she hissed. "Only when it benefits you," I said quietly. That's when she snapped. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, "but you wouldn't be anywhere if it weren't for the sacrifices we made for you. The roof, the food, the life we gave you. This is how you repay us. By walking away and letting us go without power, like strangers." I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the wall in my little apartment, tracing a crack in the paint near the ceiling. Then I said it. "You told me I'd never make it without you, that I was lost, but I'm fine, better than fine. I'm not the one calling in a panic about bills. I don't even know." Her voice trembled when she answered. "So you're going to abandon us just like that?" I repeated her words, slow and careful. "Figure it out without me, like you said I should," and I hung up. I expected backlash, maybe a storm of texts, a surprise visit, but instead, the silence returned. At first I thought it meant they were regrouping, planning their next move, but it was worse than that. They weren't planning, they were waiting. That's when the rumors started. Rena called me a week later, sounding hesitant. "Hey, have you talked to your Aunt Cecile lately?" No, I said. Why? Well, she mentioned something weird at the bakery. She said she heard from your mum that you ran off after some sort of breakdown. I sat up straight. A breakdown? Yeah. She said you got involved with people who led you astray and that you were having trouble managing your finances. That's why you left, supposedly. She even implied you'd be asking to come back soon. I closed my eyes. This was what they did. They controlled the narrative. When I didn't come back in shame, they decided to paint a version of me that should have come back in shame. I didn't say anything at first, just sat with the weight of it. Then I said, thanks for telling me. If anyone else asks, just let them wonder. But inside, something hardened. They were still trying to manipulate my life even when I was gone, still trying to pull the strings through guilt, lies, and reputation. And I decided right then that I wasn't just going to stay quiet. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, fine. But I was going to show them exactly what that outsider could do. So after I hung up on Myra and the silence stretched longer than I expected, I started to notice how subtle their tactics had become. It began with distant relatives reaching out. A cousin I hadn't heard from in 3 years suddenly texted, "Hey, just checking in. Your mum said you've been going through a hard time. Hope you're okay." Then one of Henry's old colleagues, someone I barely knew, sent a friend request on social media with a message, "If you need help getting back on your feet, I know your parents are worried sick." It was always the same structure, vague concern, sprinkled with the implication that I was lost, unstable, in need of rescuing. I didn't respond to any of them, but I kept screenshots. Every message, every passive-aggressive text from Myra, every phone call she tried to disguise as checking in. And then something else arrived. A letter, it was handwritten, that was their style when they wanted to seem heartfelt. The paper was thick, almost too formal for something personal. But the content? Nothing but guilt dressed up as grace. "Lyra, we didn't raise you to be this cold. Family should matter more than pride. We all make mistakes, but the door is still open for now. Love, Myra and Henry." That last line stuck with me. The door is still open for now. Like they were doing me a favor, as if I should rush back before the invitation expired, as if they were the ones holding all the cards. That's when I knew this wasn't just manipulation, it was strategy. They were building a narrative in the background, one where I was the ungrateful daughter who cracked under pressure. They were planning ahead, making sure that if I ever publicly stood up for myself, they'd already painted me as unreliable, emotional, ungrateful. I'd been careful, quiet, respectful, but now I was done playing polite. See, before I moved out, I had access to everything, accounts, passwords, records, not because they trusted me, but because Mira insisted I be involved in adult responsibilities. She always said that with a tight smile, like it was a privilege she was offering, not a way to make me responsible for things she didn't want to handle. That included the electric bill, the gas, even the home insurance for the house. But more importantly, the second mortgage they took out 5 years ago, in my name. It was a small loan at first, just a little help, Mira had said. You'll barely notice it. I was 18, naive. I signed the papers. And then they started missing payments. They'd insisted they were taking care of it, but I quietly set up alerts to my own email, just to be sure. Over the next 3 years, they missed 5 payments. Each time, they paid just in time to avoid consequences. But my credit, it took hits. I didn't fully understand until much later, and I never said anything. I let them think I didn't know, but now I did. I ordered a full credit report, reviewed every account linked to my name, and called the mortgage company. I learned what documents I was entitled to as the primary borrower, even if I never saw a dime of the money. And then I did what any sane, feed-up person would do. I spoke with a financial advisor. At first, she was stunned. "Wait, they used your name for a loan tied to a house you don't even own?" I nodded. "They told me it was easier that way, said it would help me build credit." She blinked. "You know that's fraud, right? Especially if you were misled." That word hung in the air like a bell ringing. Fraud. No, I wasn't planning to sue yet. That wasn't my style, but it meant I wasn't powerless, and if they wanted to keep painting me as unstable while quietly benefiting from my name, they were about to get a reality check. I requested full documentation from the mortgage company, then sent my parents a formal letter, polite but firm. In it, I stated I was aware of the mortgage taken out in my name, outlined the missed payments, and informed them I was transferring the account to new management. I also requested that they refinance or remove my name within 90 days. If not, I'd be forced to involve legal counsel. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. Then Myra called, her tone almost comically offended. How dare you take our home into your hands? That's not yours to control. No, but the loan is in my name, I replied evenly. That gives me more legal say than you think. Do you know what kind of trouble you're creating? She snapped. You think you're being smart. You're breaking this family apart. You did that when you lied to me about the loan and when you kicked me out for not being obedient enough. Henry's voice appeared in the background. I hadn't spoken to him directly since the night I left. He grabbed the phone. Lyra, I suggest you think very carefully about how far you want to push this. You still have family obligations. No, I said. I don't. He went quiet. I could hear his breath, steady but shallow, like someone trying not to lose control. Then he said, you're making enemies where you could have allies. That was his way. Never threats, just suggestions wrapped in intimidation. But I wasn't scared anymore. You made this mess, I said, and I'm done cleaning it up for you. Then I ended the call. After that, things escalated quickly. A week later, I got an email from their church's finance board. It was oddly formal, asking if I would consider meeting with them regarding some concerning allegations made in your name. Apparently, my parents had gone to their church leaders and told them I was suffering from a mental breakdown and that they were concerned I might do something drastic. They wanted the church to intervene, to bring me back into the fold. They tried to corner me with pity. I ignored the email. Instead, I posted a public update on a private Facebook group we shared with extended family. Nothing emotional, just facts. I wrote a short, clear explanation. To family and friends who may have heard things about my recent decisions, I wanted to clarify. I moved out because I was no longer safe in my parents' home. A mortgage was taken out in my name without my full understanding, and I am currently resolving it. I am financially stable, mentally sound, and living independently. Thank you to those who've reached out with genuine care. To those spreading misinformation, please consider hearing from me, before assuming the worst. Within 2 hours, I received 12 private messages. 8 were supportive, 4 were less so. But the important part, the narrative shifted. They weren't in control anymore. And then something interesting happened. I got a message from my aunt, Cecile, the same one who'd repeated Myra's breakdown theory weeks ago. Her message read, I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have repeated things I didn't understand. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. That's when I realized even villains eventually run out of room. Even their strongest lies start to crack when the truth is persistent enough. But I wasn't done, because I had one more plan in motion, something quiet, something permanent. And when it went through, they wouldn't even be able to pretend to be in charge anymore. After I posted in the family group, I expected backlash, but what I got instead was silence. That told me more than words ever could. Myra and Henry had finally realized they couldn't control the narrative anymore. Not completely, not this time. Still, I didn't let my guard down. I had learned painfully how easily silence could be misinterpreted as peace, when it was really just the calm before the next storm. But this time, I was the storm. While I waited for their next move, I met with a lawyer. Not one of those flashy TV-style attorneys, but someone quiet, experienced, and disarmingly patient. Her name was Clara. She was the kind of person who let you speak without rushing you, who took notes slowly and methodically. After I laid out everything, the mortgage, the eviction, the social media manipulation, even the fake mental breakdown smear campaign, she looked at me and said, they've counted on you staying silent for a long time. That ends now. The first step was formally demanding my removal from the second mortgage. We filed the necessary documents and sent an official notice to my parents. Clara worded it carefully, professional, polite, but with absolutely no room for misinterpretation. If they refused or ignored the request, we'd initiate legal proceedings for fraud and, more importantly, for damages tied to the impact on my credit and emotional distress. You'd think that kind of letter would scare them into compliance. But no. They replied with a handwritten letter again. You always had a flair for drama, Lyra. If you pursue this, you'll break this family apart permanently, and we will not be financially blackmailed by our own daughter. We suggest you drop this now before you do something you regret. Love always, Myra and Henry. It made my skin crawl, that same patronizing tone, pretending to be warm while drawing a clear line in the sand. But they forgot something important. I was no longer the daughter who flinched when they raised their voices. I wasn't the teenager who signed loan papers just to earn praise. I had changed, and now they were going to see just how much. We moved forward. Clara sent an official complaint to the state's Financial Oversight Department, complete with documentation proving that the loan was obtained under misleading circumstances. We also filed to have my credit record formally disputed. That process was slow, but it mattered. It meant everything was being done by the book. It took 6 weeks, but then the response came. They were forced to refinance. The bank gave them 30 days to either remove my name or face an audit of the loan itself. And suddenly, they were scrambling. Mira called me from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then she texted me, finally dropping the righteous act. We're trying to fix it. Please don't destroy us. I didn't reply. They refinanced just in time. My name was removed. My credit began to recover, and I finally, officially, had no legal ties to them. But that wasn't the end. I wanted closure, not revenge in the explosive kind of way, but a quiet, irreversible kind, something that closed the chapter completely. So I did one last thing. Remember how I used to handle their bills, their online accounts, their email backups? Well, I had kept meticulous digital records, not to spy, but out of habit. Passwords, utility bills, their tax documents, all legal. To access back when I was the one doing everything for the household, I compiled every relevant document and sent it to the IRS. I didn't exaggerate or manipulate anything. I just presented the facts. Over a dozen family expenses that were written off as business deductions. Rental income they never declared. Dependent support write-offs for relatives who didn't even live with them. It wasn't out of malice. It was just the truth. And when that audit came knocking months later, I only found out through a friend of a friend, someone who still lived in their neighborhood. Mariah's perfect little facade had cracked. Henry had to pull out of a community board position due to personal issues. Mira stopped hosting her monthly brunches. Slowly they started vanishing from the spotlight they had so carefully built for themselves. And me, I moved into a quiet apartment in the city where no one asked questions I didn't want to answer. I started my own freelance business, small at first, but entirely mine. Every time I made a sale, every time I got a good review from a client, I remembered the way Henry used to scoff at my little hobbies and how Mira said, "You'll be back once you see how hard the world really is." They were wrong. The world wasn't always kind, but it was fair in a way they never were. One afternoon, I got another letter. No return address, just my name on the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper. One line, "We hope you're proud of what you've done." I folded it back, placed it in a drawer, and smiled. Because yes, I was proud, not just of the paperwork or the legal victories. I was proud that I didn't let them break me, that I didn't become like them, bitter and manipulative, dragging people down to stay on top. They taught me a lot, what not to be, how not to love, and how powerful it is to finally say enough. And I did say it, not with screaming, not with begging, but with a signature on a set of documents that finally, irrevocably severed every tie they used to control me. That was my real revenge.